Okay? Now, what I mean by uneven cash flows is, think about it like this. You own a piece of real estate, and you paid whatever dollar amount that you paid for it, and then every year you collect rent, okay? But not only do you collect the rent, you also have expenses that you have to pay. And those expenses like insurance and property taxes and maintenance and repairs and things like that are probably going to vary a little bit or maybe a lot from one year to the next, okay? Also, you're gonna have different occupancy rates, maybe from one year to the next. So, as a matter of practice, almost all real estate sort of valuations that you're going to be looking at, you're going to be dealing with uneven cash flows, meaning that the income streams are going to change from one year to the next. So as an example, you might have something that looks like this. So once again, over 5 years, we start off, let's say again, with a $10,000 investment, but maybe in the first year, you do get your, let's say, $2,500 bucks. But the following year, maybe you're able to cut your expenses down, so you're able to generate more income. So maybe you get $3,000 in the second year. But then in the third year, maybe you end up having to do some unexpected repairs, so maybe that kicks you down to $2,000. And then maybe in the fourth year, you're able to maybe raise your rents dramatically, and so all of a sudden maybe you're able to go up to $4,000. And then maybe in the fifth year, you go back down to maybe $3,500. Okay, the point being is it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, okay, in terms of your income and your expenses. So in this case, first of all, let's start off with the simple math of just simply, like we did last, what is the total amount that we've actually collected in revenue, just to kind of get a perspective. So 2,500 plus 3,000 plus 2,000 plus 4,000 plus 3,500. So $15,000 of income. Everybody cool with that? All right. Now, so in simple terms, we made $5,000 profit. Would be one way to look at that. Okay, that we bought it for $10,000, but over the next 5 years, we got a total of $15,000 of income. So basically $5,000 profit in terms of just raw numbers, no time value of money involved, just raw numbers. Okay, now, let's say, however, we want to be able to calculate what our rate of return is. Okay, now we get to use a little bit of a different set of functions on the calculator. Okay, so to start with, once again, hit the shift and the clear all. And then once again, this is annual compounding or annual payments, so one payment per year. Now if your calculator is still set for one payment per year, then you don't necessarily have to put this back in again, okay? The one shift and the payment per year, okay? You only have to do that whenever you're going from monthly to annual or annual to monthly, all right? But now, the first piece of this is where it's going to be a little bit different for cash flows, for uneven cash flows. You're going to start out and you're going to put in 10,000 plus or minus, but instead of the present value key, here you're going to be using the cash flow key. All right, let's show you where that is on the calculator here real quick. CF sub J. All right, you look over on the calculator, third row, third column, CF sub J. That is simply saying cash flow, and then the sub J represents the period that the cash flow occurs in, okay? Now, in this case, that is simply, whenever you type this in, 10,000 plus or minus, the change of sign key, and you hit the CFJ button, what it's going to show up in your display very briefly is it's going to say CF0. And that's simply letting you know that cash flow is occurring at time period 0. Does it do that? Yes? Okay. Now, for the next one, you're going to simply put in 2,500. You're going to hit the cash flow key again. Now it's going to say in your display, CF1. Simply letting you know, cash flow for period 1. Okay, continue on. 3,000 as a cash flow, 2,000 as a cash flow, 4,000 as a cash flow, and 3,500 as a cash flow. Okay? So now after you've done that last one, the 3,500, and hit the cash flow, once again, it should have popped up in the display, CF5, and just simply indicate, obviously, cash flow for the 5th period. All right, now, in this particular case, what we're going to use is a new function. Okay, so in addition to the cash flow function, another function of the calculator is what is referred to as the internal rate of return. Okay, and that is shift IRR per year. Okay, now let me show you on the calculator. So basically, on the second row, third column, underneath the CST button, you see IRR/year. That is referring to what is the internal rate of return for that year, or basically what is the interest rate or return on this investment. Okay, so let's put all that in and let's see what we get. I know the overachievers have already done it, so everybody else a chance. Okay, so you should get 14.1, let's say 5 rounded, okay? So 14.15% should be your internal rate of return. All right, everybody getting that? Yep.
I have a comment and a question.
Okay.
The comment is that we should keep in mind that the interest rate of return is an annualized interest. Therefore, the if you're looking at your key, the I over YR, that is the same thing as the internal rate of return when you're using even cash flows.
Correct.
Because at the beginning of the program, I had the idea that one was the interest rate and the other one was the internal rate of return, and if they were two different
and they get used sort of interchangeably.
Right. My question is, what happens when you're using a calculator and you're using uneven cash flows, and then you want to throw in, after you did the 14, 15, you got to that final answer, you want to throw in that, for example, you added a sale on year 5. Do you have to go through the whole thing?
I was just about to do that.
Oh, okay.
So, so the question is, like we did with the previous problem, what if we want to have a resale value, okay, at the end of all of this? At the end of year 5, we want to sell the asset, again, for $10,000. Now, the gut reaction is the wrong thing to do, okay? So we rephrase it, or not rephrase it, but let me say it again. Your gut reaction is the wrong thing to do. Your gut reaction is to simply go in, put in another line item of $10,000 and hit cash flow again and resolve for the interest rate. Can't do it. And here's the reason why. Okay? And make sure it's not complicated, it's just it's very logical. Okay? Now here's the thing, let me kind of, I didn't quite state this for this group. I always say this. A lot of people have fears of numbers. I get that. Okay? But the thing to realize about all of this, the calculator's doing all the work. Okay? All you really have to follow is the logic. Okay? You're not really having to do any math at all. All you really have to do is focus on the logic, focus on the steps, focus on the procedure. Because what will happen in every single one of these problems, there are only so many ways I can ask you to do this kind of problem. I mean, for the most part, all I can really do is change the numbers. It's the same process over and over and over. And that's the thing that you're going to see. Those of you that are brand new to this, it's going to be scary at first. It's going to scare the daylights out of you at first. But then at some point, the light goes on, and then all of a sudden, it makes sense. Would those of you that have had the finance class tend to agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So those of you that are brand new to this, don't get freaked out just yet, okay? Give yourself a little bit of time, take a deep breath, it'll all be okay. All right, now, so your question was, what if we add in this resale value or this reversion value, all right? How do we have to treat that with the calculator, all right? So what we're gonna do is, yes, we have to start all over again because we cannot simply replace one of the cash flows, okay? The calculator doesn't allow us to sort of basically go back and replace one of these particular cash flows. And what we actually have to do, and this is where it's different. This is one of the things that, once again, once you've got it in your brain, this is how it works, it's there. But sometimes getting there initially, it doesn't always make sense. What you've actually got to do with the uneven cash flows is you've got to add those two numbers together, okay? And so, because that's the total dollar amount that you are receiving at time period 5 or year 5.
After selling the...
Yeah, after selling. In other words, this cash flow is, this is your operating cash flow, so to speak. This is the sale price. So you've got to add those two together. So you're going to get $13,500, and that is going to be your, watch what I'm doing here, I'm going to highlight it. Now, $13,500 is going to be your final 5th year cash flow. So you're going to re-put in everything, okay? And you're going to get a new number for the internal rate of return. So let's just see what we get.
I thought you were gonna give me a different trick.
No, I wish I could.
Because I was looking for a way not to re-input.
No, and I wish there were. And, you know, obviously in Excel,
Yeah.
it's easy peasy, but, you know, with calculator, not so much. Okay. Okay, so if I put everything in right, I get 2860. Yep. 28.6 rounded. Okay. Yep.
Could you just repeat again why you use the internal rate of return instead of just the interest?
Okay. Because whenever you're using the cash flow function, it's using a different part of the calculator. I don't know how quite else to explain this, but the point is with the cash flows, those all relate to, in terms of the functioning of the internal memory and how the calculator is sort of storing this information, how it's processing it. It is linked, if you will, to the internal rate of return function. It's not, these are not linked to the present value, the interest rate, any of the sort of top row keys.
So would cash flow be the only one where you would actually just use, if you want to find the interest rate, that particular key?
Correct. Okay, so this is simply giving us our internal rate of return or our rate of return for this uneven set or series of cash flows. Does that make sense? Now, quite frankly, as I kind of sort of said a little bit earlier, this is going to be the most used function probably in this course. Is you're going to be given a series of cash flows and you're going to be asked to calculate internal rate of return over and over and over and over and over again, okay? So it's something that, you know, you've definitely got to understand the logic, you know, behind all this. This is the I'm not trying to scare anybody, but this is the simple piece, okay? This is the part that, in essence, is taking it at its most basic level. But what we're going to be doing in this class is we're going to be complicating up how do we even get these numbers, okay? What do we have to go through to actually calculate these numbers? And are these numbers going to be on a before-tax basis? Are they going to be on an after-tax basis? Are they going to be from an investor's perspective? Are they going to be basically from a lender's perspective? Are they going to be from, you know, whoever's perspective, or just the overall project perspective? So, and all that would become much clearer as we, like I said, go a little further down the road, okay? All right, moving forward. All right. Now, let's see, making sure I kind of keep things going here. All right, so let's just do some of the basic sort of time value of money calculations using present value, future value, that sort of thing. All right. And I'm kind of trying to follow, to a certain extent, the order of some of the material that is here within this handout so that you can kind of go back and watch the videos. Now, for those of you that are brand new, you may or may not realize every single video or every single class is recorded. There are two cameras back there. One is exclusively focused on the screen, the other is focused on the room, okay? What I do at the end of each day is, for every class, is we upload those to YouTube, okay? And so you can actually go back and watch this same class 3 years ago. And you're probably going to see virtually the same material. So quite frankly, if you wanted to come into this class more prepared, next week you could watch the same video from last year about the same material. You follow? Which would actually give you even more of a heads up, okay? So, you know, but the point being, it's all on YouTube. The way to access it, just while I'm thinking about it, because it's really, really simple, is you simply go to youtube.com.
So we're paying all this money for no reason?
Well, you've got to obviously be tested. You've got to obviously demonstrate that you have the proficiency.
Right.
The paper that they printed the promo.
Okay, so go to youtube.com and simply type in MSRED REE. And this particular course, obviously the way I've got it organized is you just simply type in REE 5887 and it will pull up all of the videos for literally the past 3 years for this course, and they're all sequenced by date, and then typically there are multiple videos per class session, so it will say something like that, and it'll say, you know, whatever today's date is, January, whatever is it, 12th, 11th, 13th, 2018, and then it'll say video 1 of type 3, or something like that. And then you can go in and watch any of those. Yeah.
So can you assume, like, for example, I watched the one that was, I think, May 13th is what it says.
Yep.
Can you assume that the next one for the next class will be the one that's
Yep.
after that, May 20th?
It's all in sequence. I mean, after having taught this stuff for 30 years, I tend to not necessarily say the exact same things, and I not necessarily go in precisely the same order, but there's a general consistency of the information that I'm covering. Yep.
I think kind of what he was getting at is like class structure has changed. So what class we're taking now in January might not have also been of January of last year, correct?
Oh, no. Yeah, that may be true. But in terms of the content
Right,
of the course, the 5887 course, the content is the same.
Right. So look up the class rather than
No.
the date.
My question was,
Oh.
like, the one for today's class,
Yeah.
like a year ago or whenever it was actually like in May.
Right. It's happening, yeah, a different time of the year, but the same course. Yeah.
How to make sure that you watch the one for the class that you're
Yeah.
going to is.
Right. You just have to sort of go back and look at the calendar.
And you're going to
Figure it out.
syllabus.
Oh, I'm sorry?
And then when you start, you're probably going to syllabus.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Moving forward. All right. Where was okay? So one of the first things that we'll do that they sort of start out with compounding a single amount. All right. So this is all right. So this is where we want to find out what the value of something is in the future, okay? And if you're trying to follow along page by page, this is on page 3.13, okay? Now, this is the case of where, okay, we're going to start out and we're going to say, okay, how many periods per year? But before we do that, we're going to do shift clear all. And we're going to make the assumption that this is, and this, I'm not working the example that's in the text, I'm working off the top of my head a different example, but just to sort of show you the process. So one payment per year. Okay, now, the pieces of information that you're going to need for this, you're going to need to know what is the present value. Okay, so let's say that we've got a present value of $50,000. Okay. $50,000 is our present value. We also need to know what our interest rate is that we're going to be investing at. So let's say that our interest rate is going to be 3% a year. All right? And we also need to know what the term of this investment is going to be. So in this case, let's say it's going to be 15 years. Okay? And then we're going to be solving for future value. So what we're saying in the setup here is that we have a dollar amount of $50,000 that we're basically going to put into a bank account, and that bank account's going to earn 3% per year over the next 15 years, and we are wanting to know how much is going to be in that bank account at the end of 15 years. Does that make sense, everybody, conceptually, yes or no? Okay, now the one thing I will point out is this one time, just so that you can kind of correlate what I'm putting up here with what is in your text. What they do is, in essence, the same sort of thing, but then they also just sort of show you that, in essence, the other functions, like the payment function, is 0 because there is no payment in this particular problem. They also show you that the interest rate, in this case, they do give you that, but the payment is 0, okay? So there's no need to put in a payment, is my point, okay? Now, all right, so we go through when we do this. All right, so you end up with $77,898.37. Okay, now, one little thing to point out that we can look at it a couple of different ways. If I were being really, you see this number is a negative number, okay? There's a reason for that. The reason for that is the calculator always has to match up basically inflows and outflows, okay? In other words, someone is always writing the check, someone is always receiving the check, and so you're going to have typically two parties to the transaction. So in this particular way, the way that I have set it up here, this perspective, by putting in the $50,000 as a positive number for a deposit, that would be from the lender's or the bank's perspective, if you will. They are receiving. In other words, you're writing me a check for $50,000, but let's say I am the lender, okay? I am the one that's the banker. So I am receiving your check at $50,000, so to me, that's a positive transaction, all right? To you, it's negative, okay? But to me, it's positive, all right? Then over the next 15 years, I'm basically letting this interest accrue of 3%, and then at the end of that 15 years, I, as the lender, am writing you a check back for the $77,898.37. Okay, but we could flip it and then put this in as a negative, and if we did, this would now be a positive because that would be from your perspective. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so that's the thing. What's one of the tricky things at the beginning of this that throws people off a little bit is making sure that they're keeping track of who is basically writing the check, who is receiving the check. And it really becomes mission critical whenever things start to get complicated. Like, for example, let's say that I'm an investor. Well, let's give you an example. So let's say that once again, we've got one payment per year. And then once again, clear everything out just to make sure everything's done. And so let's say that I bought an investment for $100,000, and that is a cash outflow to me. And I hold this investment for 5 years, and at the end of 5 years, let's say that I sell this for $150,000. Okay? But during that 5-year period, I receive rental income from a tenant. And that rental income per year is maybe $20,000. Now the question is that going to be a positive or a negative payment? Okay, if I receive, if this is my investment that I have made, so as an investor, I have spent the $100,000 up front, and I'm going to get $150,000 at the end of all of this, and during the time I own it, I'm going to be receiving $20,000 a year in rental income, then yes, this is going to be a positive payment. Does everybody follow me on that? Yes or no? Okay, so then we would solve for what is my rate of return? Okay, or my interest rate. Let's do this real quick. I want to illustrate the point, you'll see what I mean. Okay, so you should get 25.98%. Okay, everybody good with that? Yes? Okay, now, what if, instead of that being $20,000 of lease payments per year, what if instead it was $20,000 a year of holding costs? Like for example, every year I own, for example, assume this is like a piece of dirt, okay? Or a building that's unoccupied, okay? You're gonna have property taxes, insurance, maintenance, all these expenses, and there's no rental income. You could very well, that $20,000 could be a negative, okay? So to sort of see what the impact would be, let's just simply put in the 20,000, but put it in as a negative cash flow or negative payment. You can just follow on down. You don't have to re-put in everything. You can just replace that one key piece of information. I'm sorry, yeah, $20,000 was as the payment. Now what we get a negative return of 8.22%. So I follow that? So you're losing money. Clearly, it's a negative return because we just do the simple math. 100,000 is what you're buying it for, and you're selling it for 150. So there's $50,000 of profit, theoretically, yes? But out of that $50,000 profit, you got $20,000 a year for 5 years that you're basically having to come out of pocket. So $20,000 a year for 5 years is what? 100 grand. So your net loss on this is really 50 grand. Does that make sense? Yes or no? Okay, so that's the point. A negative return of 8 points. So this is where it really matters as to how you may classify something as a plus or a minus in terms of the bookkeeping aspect of who's receiving the revenue versus who is spending something. Okay? Make sense? Okay, moving forward. All right, so the next one is basically an annuity. All right, so here you could have a situation of where you've got a fixed amount that you are depositing each year, and you want to know how much that's going to grow to. So instead of being a fixed amount that you're a one-time deposit, you're going to have multiple deposits, okay? So in this case, what we've got, let's say, once again, one payment per year. And once again, make sure we clear it out. And so here, how much do we want to deposit each year? Let's say $500 a year. All right, so $500 a year is the deposit. We're going to make that a negative deposit or negative payment. All right, and we're going to deposit that for 10 years. And basically our interest rate for this particular situation is going to be 6%. And we're going to be asking you how much is that annual deposit going to be worth at the end of that 10-year period. Okay, first of all, let's do some simple math. Okay, the simple math is we're depositing $500 a year, yes? Okay, how many total deposits are we making? 10. So 10 times 500 is 5,000. So at an absolute minimum, we know there's going to be something greater than $5,000 in that account at the end of 10 years. Does that make sense? Okay? But how much more depends on what the interest rate is. Okay? So in this case, let's just see. And so you end up with 65, 90, 39, 40 rounded, okay? All right, so let's just once again see if you're paying attention. So, how much interest did you earn during that 10-year period?
6%.
No. How much interest did you earn in terms of dollar amount?
$1,590.
Right, $1,590.40, because we just said, with our simple math, we knew $500 times 10 years would be 5,000. So if we simply subtract out that 5,000 from this, that leaves us with 1,590.40. Does that make sense? So that's the value of compounding interest. Yay. Okay. Moving forward. All right. Now,
You know how to listen.
sinking funds.
So
Alright.
if we're looking for an answer, the answer will be the 1,590, not the 6.
Well, no. Well, it depends on what I'm asking. If I'm simply asking how much is going to be in the account at the end of 10 years, then that. But if I were to ask, okay, how much interest did you make during that 10-year period, then the answer would be the 15, whatever, 94.
Principles that,
Right. Okay, sinking funds. All right. So in this particular case, what we are trying to figure out is how much we would need to deposit on a regular basis in order to accumulate some sort of a dollar amount in the future. Now, you're thinking, what? Okay, what we're talking about here is, let's say that you own an apartment complex and you're trying to figure out how much you need to set aside, maybe out of the rental income, to have money available to replace an air conditioner, or how to, to replace refrigerators, or to replace the carpet, or to do a whole number of sort of upgrades to the property. You know they're inevitable. In other words, you know that after 10 years, you're going to have to replace this stuff. Okay, is my point. They are items that you're going to potentially, so you're going to set aside sort of capital reserves or a sinking fund to basically help you to do that. All right, so in this case, first of all, we're going to say, okay, 1 payment per year. Clear it out. All right. So how much money do we want to have to accumulate at the end of the period? So in other words, we want to replace like the roof and maybe, air conditioning, all this other sort of stuff. So
$100,000.
$100,000 is what we need to accumulate. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to put in $100,000, and that's going to be our future value. Okay? Now, how many years before we actually have to do these things? Well, let's just say it's 7 years. Okay? Now, what sort of an interest rate are we going to be able to earn over that 7-year period? Because what we're doing is we're basically making these annual deposits into this interest-bearing account for the next 7 years, and we need to accumulate $100,000. Okay, so let's say 3%. Okay, so what we're going to be solving for is what is that annual payment amount that we need to set aside each year. Okay? So $13,050.64. Okay, do I find that? Okay, so once again, let's just do some simple math just to kind of gain perspective here. Okay, so we're setting aside $13,000 a year into this interest-bearing account. Well, over 7 years. Now, what if there were no interest involved? What if it was just simply we're stuffing the money in our mattress, okay, hoping that we accumulate $100,000 after 7 years? How much would we have to stuff in our mattress each year? Well, $100,000 divided by 7 would be $14,285 per year that we would literally be stuffing in our mattress. But instead of stuffing in our mattress, we put it in the bank. We're able to basically only have to put $13,000 instead of $14,200. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
What bank is that?
Okay. Are we good with that? Okay, so once again, the whole purpose behind the sinking fund is simply what is the dollar amount that we have to deposit either each year or each month. Now, what if we wanted to do this on a monthly basis? Okay, what would we have to do? Basically, we go over here, change this to 12 payments per year, clear it out. We still put in the $100,000 as our future value. We still put in 7 years as our term, but now it's going to do 7 times 12, which is going to be what? 84, okay, months. We still have our interest rate of 3%. Now, when we solve for payment, the amount that we get is going to be monthly that we're going to be depositing. Okay, so let's see what we get. And you get $1,071.33. Now, one thing I want to point out here, your first rookie mistake is to say, well, can you just divide it by 12?
No.
No. And the reason why you can't just simply divide this by 12 and get this is because the compounding effect of the interest is that every month that you're paying in, you're beginning to earn interest on top of interest on top of interest on top of interest, okay? So let's just see, just for fun, what that amount would be times 12. So 12,855.96. So the moral of the story is, would you be better off putting in the money on a monthly basis, or would you be better off depositing on an annual basis? Monthly. Because you're depositing less money than you would be depositing if you waited until the end of the year.
$1,500.
Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Moving forward. Okay. Blowing through this stuff. Okay. All right, so that one I think already covered that, so we're good with that. Okay, so discounting. All right, so this is starting on page 319. Or you can do an annuity, dude. What the heck? Okay. The question was, what does an annuity do? What do an annuity do? Okay. Sort of make a nice little timeline here. All right, so we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right, so let's say that we've got a situation of where we have made an investment of $10,000. So $10,000 cash outflow here at time period. This is a little timeline to kind of help illustrate the concept. So we made a $10,000 investment, and then we start receiving rental income, and we'll keep this relatively simple, $3,000 a year for 5 years. Okay. Now, once again, simple math. How much of income are we generating? $15,000. Okay. So net profit, $5,000. Okay. Now, the assumption that we normally make, that we make, is that we receive all cash flows from an investment at the end of the year, okay? Now, my explanation for that is really kind of from an accounting perspective. Now, you may very well collect your rents at the beginning of the month and so forth, so on, you know, over the course of the year. But at the end of the year, you have to kind of roll things up into a nice tidy sum of what money do I really make, okay, you know, in terms for tax purposes, okay, if no other reason. Or depending on what your fiscal year is, if it's not the calendar year. But the point being is, at the end of the year, whether it's your fiscal year or the calendar year. And so what has happened over the course of that year is you have received whatever rents that you've received as the owner of that property. You have spent whatever money you needed to on operating expenses and property taxes and insurance and whatever else. And then at the end of the year, after everything is said and done, you are left with $3,000. Does that make sense? Yes or no? Okay? So the point being is the reckoning, if you will, of what the actual cash flow is really occurs at the end of the year. Now, 99 times out of 100, that is the way it is going to be treated, and that is the way that you're going to sort of calculate it. Okay, is everybody clear on that? Yes or no? Now, in some instances, and this is where, once again, our resident accountant can, you know, help us with this, is this whole idea of what we refer to as cash accounting versus accrual accounting. Okay, cash accounting is what? It's basically when you get paid. Yes? And accrual accounting is basically
Based on the time that the expense or income is.
yeah. Okay. So accrual is basically kind of what we've got up here to a certain extent. Cash is you might actually receive the money at the beginning of the year or beginning of the month, and you're sort of recognizing it then. Okay, as opposed to allowing it to accrue over time to deal with the operating expenses and that sort of thing. Well, the point with that is that if that is the case, and you're sort of recognizing the income the moment that you receive it, then it's basically, it's like shifting everything back one period. So it's like saying you're getting that first $3,000 there and so forth, so on, and the last, or on the 5th year, is basically going to be 0. Does that make sense? Everything gets shifted one period forward. And that is referred to, or an annuity due, in the sense that that is the money, it's being received right now, it's due and payable right this minute, kind of thing. Does that make sense conceptually? Now, we almost never ever use this in practice in terms of the annuity due, okay? But you asked it, so. Now,
you've got to push the special button on the calculator.
well, you do, and we'll do that real quick. Okay, so in this particular case, what you're going to do is you're going to do one payment per year. Okay. Now, on your calculator, over on the right-hand side, underneath the margin key, you're going to see BEG/END, begin, end. All right? Whenever you hit the shift key, and then you hit the BEG/END, you're going to see in your display BEG. Okay? Hit the shift, and then the begin/end key, which is right underneath the MAR margin key. Okay? That is telling you your calculator is now in the begin mode, or annuity due sort of mode. In other words, it's assuming that all payments are being made or received at the beginning of the period. So all that button does is it's doing the math of shifting everything back for whatever you put in that follows it. So in this case, we put in 10,000 as our present value. We put in 3,000 as our payment for 5 years. And we solve for, in this case, a rate of return Let's see what we get. What I get is 25.68%, okay? Now, do this. Hit the shift, begin in, then resolve for the interest rate. That's how much of a difference it makes. In other words, the 25% is where we have received, from a cash perspective, the $3,000 at the beginning of the year. Does that make sense?
Is that why all the landlords want the beginning, the rent in?
No, it's not so much that it's one they want at the beginning of the month. It's just more of it's a question of how you're calculating a return. This, in all honesty, the 25.68 is not an honest way of calculating your rate of return. I mean, yes, you're receiving the income then, but you're not realizing all of the expenses.
Correct.
Okay.
HOA fees.
Whatever, yeah. Now, if you don't have any expenses and that sort of thing, then yeah, you, I guess, claim that yes, that's your return. But it's traditionally for real estate, we always make the assumption everything occurs at the end of the period. Okay, to reflect any and all sort of changes. So it's a big difference just between, and this is, you know, and I really don't want to get into the finer points of accounting. That's what San Miguel is here for. Our professor who teaches our specialized classes in sort of accounting and financial markets. But the point being is, you can, as a real estate owner, you could potentially try to claim income earlier than maybe you really should be claiming it, and it could inflate potentially your returns. Okay? Yeah.
When you're analyzing the purchase, if the entity gives you something that you have to analyze and you're coming up with 15.27, and they have that, you're not going to, you're not going to ultimately pay them as much, because when you're checking the net.
No, understood.
Per cap, yeah.
Okay, moving on. Okay, so, all right, so the next one on page 319, this one discounting a future amount to a single sort of present value. All right, so in this case, let's say that we know we're going to be able to sell an asset for $1 million. All right. And that's going to be the future value at some point in time. And we are wanting to get a 15% rate of return on that investment. And we are assuming this is going to occur over, I don't know, a 15-year term as well. We want to know how much that investment would be worth to us today. Or how
Assuming
much-
the 1 year,
I'm sorry?
assuming the payment per year.
Well, I'm sorry, yes,
Yeah.
1 payment per year.
What is this called again?
Once again, this is page 319, discounting a single value, future value, into a present value. Okay. So that means 122,894.49 is going to be basically the present value, okay, or the amount this investment would be. In other words, another way to look at this is if we were to spend $122,000 today, and this thing were to grow in value at 15% a year for 15 years, it would technically be worth $1 million, okay, 15 years from now. Does that make sense? Okay. Moving forward. I'm getting close to getting out of time. Okay. Let's see here. All right. So, in this case, we want to basically, this is page 321, this is pretty much mortgage payments for all intents and purposes. So here, let's say that we do it on 12 payments per year. And we want to borrow $500,000, so that's going to be our present value. And our interest rate is going to be 7%. And our term is going to be 15 years. What we're wanting to know is what is the payment that we would have to be making in order to satisfy that particular loan, okay? So 44, 94, 14. Okay, make sense? So that would just be the monthly payment to basically fully amortize or fully pay off this $500,000 loan at 7% for 15 years. Okay? All right, this is through that section. Okay, we have already done sort of the cash flows in terms of the IRR. We've got that. I think we've pretty well got everything. Some of the little things you can probably work through. So we'll wrap up with that for today. So what that means, we'll have a couple of little, what I'm going to call cleanup issues at the beginning of class next time, and then that's when we will do the quiz. Okay? So now, this is what I would do if I were you. If I were you, I would now go back through both of these modules, because we will get through module 4 next time as well, okay? So go through both of these between now and next week. Look at the old videos, look at the videos from today, work through, make sure that you've got it and you understand it. And I would also highly, highly, highly encourage you to find a study buddy, okay? Find somebody that you can potentially study with and kind of help each other out in terms of answering questions and that sort of thing, okay? Make sense? Now, those of you that are in the law class, I don't know why they did this, but they located it in a different room. So it's actually, I think, upstairs, I think in 20, I have it written down, 2066. Look it up. Make sure. I don't really honestly don't know what it is. I'll make it.
2060.
Okay, 2060. So that will start at 12:30. Okay. All right. Any questions? Okay. We'll see you next week. I like look at well, it does.
I was getting 447.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you got to press it again? What'd you do? Do it again and turn it off. Oh, yeah. So,